Hello there. Are you at all confused about this year's ballot? We are working for you to get you ready for this year's election so you can make the most informed decisions. Thank you for joining us here. I'm Netta Iranpour, and this year Californians will vote on 10 different statewide propositions. Now, these issues, a wide range. They address school funding, marriage equality, climate programs, housing, infrastructure, prison labor, minimum wage, rent control, health care, and criminal justice reform. These propositions could shape the future of our state in many ways. So we're going to spend the next several minutes here breaking down each proposition for you, providing you with the information you need before you cast your ballot. So let's start here with Proposition 2. Prop 2 asks voters to approve a $10 billion bond for school construction and modernization. Brandon Ritteman explains.
The first statewide ballot question this election is Prop 2. California lawmakers are asking you to borrow and spend $10 billion on school buildings. Generally speaking, the state government picks up half the cost of construction for school buildings. This $10 billion of borrowing would go to competitive grants that public schools can apply for to build or renovate their campuses. Here's how the money would be divided. A small slice of the money, $1.5 billion, would go to community colleges. The rest to public K-12 schools, $4 billion of it for renovations, $3.3 billion for new buildings, and smaller amounts for charter and technical schools. Borrowing money this way in bonds is the government's version of taking out a home mortgage. The state would get the $10 billion right now and then pay it back over the next 35 years. It costs money to borrow money. By the time we pay back the bonds, the $10 billion of spending will cost California taxpayers a total of $17.5 billion with interest. The payments would cost $500 million a year. Prop 2 comes with no new taxes and no plan at all to raise the money to cover those payments. That means the state legislature would have to factor the payments into the budget every year. A yes vote on Prop 2 approves the $10 billion of borrowing for school construction. A no vote rejects the measure.
And next, we have Proposition 3. This one aims to reaffirm the right of same-sex couples to marry in California by creating a constitutional amendment.
In capital speak, Prop 3 is what they call a cleanup law. Court rulings have made same-sex marriage legal in California and nationwide. Even so, California still has a law in the books banning same-sex marriage. If you open our state constitution, you'll find these words in Article 1. Only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. This was the controversial Prop 8, approved by California voters back in 2008. Because the courts already struck it down, it's unenforceable. If voters pass Prop 3 this year, the language will be repealed and replaced with "the right to marry is a fundamental right." No mention of gender at all. Attitudes towards queer people have changed a lot in 16 years. Prop 3 is going to give California our first direct test of how much. A yes vote on Prop 3 would repeal California's obsolete ban on same-sex marriages. And a no vote would keep the ban in the state constitution, but that ban would remain unenforceable.
And now we will move on to Proposition 4. This one proposes a $10 billion bond for various climate programs. The aim is to offset recent budget cuts in these critical areas.
Prop 4 is another borrow and spend package proposed by the state legislature. It's the same amount as Prop 2, a $10 billion bond, but Prop 4 would fund something different. A whole bunch of infrastructure and environmental projects, most of them tied to climate change. The biggest chunk, almost $4 billion, would be spent on water projects for drought, flood, and water supply, with lesser amounts for forest health and wildfire, sea level rise, land conservation, energy projects, parks, adapting to extreme heat, and helping farmers to respond to climate change. The spending plan for most of these categories gets broken down into specific types of projects, everything from building new power lines to shade canopies for farmers markets. Prop 4 has this list of categories of spending, but there's no list of specific projects. The exact projects that get all this funding would be decided by the state agencies that get the money once they have it. All you're deciding here is whether to borrow the money. Bonds are like taking out a big loan. Passing Prop 4 would commit the state to paying back those bonds, $400 million a year for 40 years. That's a grand total of $16 billion of taxpayer money over the long term to borrow $10 billion for this spending today. Prop 4 has no new taxes or any kind of plan to raise all that money, so it would be up to future lawmakers and governors to factor these payments into the budget for the next 40 years. A yes vote on Prop 4 would approve the borrowing of that $10 billion for the climate package of spending. A no vote rejects the measure.
Okay, now let's look at Proposition 5. Now, Prop 5 would lower voter approval requirements for local housing and infrastructure bonds. Here's a closer look.
Many of this year's props involve the state borrowing money to pay for big projects. Prop 5 is a statewide question all about making it easier for voters to pass local bonds and, by extension, increase local property taxes to pay the money back. Right now, if your city or county government wants to take out bonds to fund new infrastructure, they need to put it up for a vote, and a 2/3 supermajority of the voters has to approve it. Prop 5 would lower that threshold to 55% of the vote, starting with this election right now. A 55% vote is already the standard to approve bonds for school districts and community colleges. California voters approved that change back in the year 2000. Prop 5 would set that same easier voting standard to allow local governments to win approval and borrow and spend on big projects like building fire stations, roads, or any other kind of infrastructure, specifically including lower-income housing projects. The legislature's nonpartisan staff figures if Prop 5 were to pass, about 20 to 50% more local bond measures would pass when they go up for a vote. That would add up to billions of dollars in new local government spending, which has to be paid back through increased property taxes. Of course, how much it costs you would depend on where you live and what specific borrow and spend measures come up for a vote and pass in your area in the future. A yes vote on Prop 5 approves the new 55% voting threshold, making it easier for local props on your ballot to pass starting this year. A no vote rejects the measure, keeping the current requirement that 2/3 of the voters approve these local bonds.
Okay, hopefully you're following all of this. And now Proposition 6 is an amendment to the state constitution that impacts people in our jails and prisons. Brandon Ritteman now explaining what would change.
We have 10 statewide propositions in California this year. Many of them ask you to pass laws with dozens of pages of text. But Prop 6 is so simple and short, it's easiest if I just show you the actual language. The California Constitution currently contains the following 2 sentences. Slavery is prohibited. Involuntary servitude is prohibited except to punish crime. As you can see, this language makes mandatory prison labor legal. Prop 6 would undo that. This sentence would change to read, slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited. And Prop 6 would add another line of law to the Constitution. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation shall not discipline any incarcerated person for refusing a work assignment. That's it. That's the entire prop. For context, yes, required prison labor is a thing. The state analysts tell us about 1/3 of the prison population has jobs, and many earn less than $1 an hour. Prisons use carrots and sticks to get inmates working. The carrots, like earning money and credit towards early release, would remain legal if Prop 6 were to pass. The sticks, like losing your phone privileges for refusing to work, those wouldn't be legal anymore. If you look in the official voter guide, you won't find any argument against Prop 6. No one bothered to submit one to the state. A yes vote on Prop 6 would ban forced prison labor. A no vote rejects the measure.
This has been so helpful so far. Thank you, Brandon, for explaining all of this. There's certainly a lot to consider in Props 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which we just showed you. So we're going to take a quick break here. Don't go anywhere, because up next, we're diving into the rest of the statewide propositions on your ballot. Stay with us. Welcome back here. Hopefully you had some time to go over your notes, perhaps, as you're watching this. I'm Neda Irampur. We're going to continue our coverage here of California's propositions with a closer look now at Proposition 32. This has been a hotly debated topic for many years. Brandon Rittiman explains how Prop 32 would raise the state minimum wage.
Prop 32 aims to raise California's minimum wage to $18 an hour. Right now, the minimum wage is $16. It's expected to go up 50 cents for inflation next year. But instead, Prop 32 would raise the minimum wage to $18 an hour next year, which is a 9% raise. There is a caveat. People working for companies with 25 or fewer employees would get a little less, $17 an hour next year. In 2026, if Prop 32 were to pass, the minimum wage would simply be $18 an hour regardless of the size of the employer. It's forecast to hit $17 an hour that year without Prop 32. Then, come 2027, the minimum wage would simply keep adjusting for inflation just like it does already. With Prop 32, it would simply start adjusting from a $1 higher amount. Some cities have higher minimum wages than the state. Prop 32 won't undo that. California also has new special minimum wages for specific jobs. Prop 32 doesn't change those either. This year, we started to have a higher minimum wage of $20 an hour, specifically for most fast food workers, and we're phasing in higher minimum wages of $18 to $23 an hour for many healthcare workers. Prop 32 won't change those numbers whether it passes or fails. In general, raising the minimum wage puts pressure on businesses who pay it. Some might raise their prices on the things you buy from them. Others might lay people off. On the flip side, employers also tend to consider giving raises to other workers already making more than the minimum wage just because the minimum wage went up. A yes vote on Prop 32 increases California's general minimum wage to $18 an hour starting next year. A no vote rejects the measure, keeping the minimum wage next year at its forecast $16.50.
And now let's move on to Proposition 33. This measure would allow local governments to impose rent control. Here's a closer look.
Prop 33 is the latest attempt to expand rent control in California. If Prop 33 passes, it would repeal what's called the Costa-Hawkins Act. That's a state law that restricts city and county governments from enacting certain rent control ordinances. Under Costa-Hawkins, local governments can't impose rent controls on single-family homes, any housing built since February of 1995, or the price of rent for new renters moving in. If Prop 33 passes, all three of these limits disappear. Local governments could decide whether they want to enact tougher rent controls or not. If they do enact more rent control measures, that could lower rents and allow people to move homes less often. But state analysts point out some landlords may decide to sell their investment properties, leading to fewer homes available for rent, which is a drag on the market. It could also drag down the home values of rental properties, slightly reducing the property taxes paid to local governments and public schools. The backers of Prop 33 tried before to do this exact same thing back in 2018. It failed, with 59% of voters saying no. Voters also rejected another less intensive rent control expansion in 2020 by a similar margin. A yes vote on Prop 33 allows local governments to impose more kinds of rent control. A no vote keeps rent control restrictions the way they are now, handing the proponents their third defeat.
Okay, that's the one on housing there. Next, we have Proposition 34, which focuses on health care spending. We explain how Prop 34 has a connection to Prop 33.
On paper, Prop 34 is about controlling what it calls prescription drug price manipulators. But strap in, there's a lot more to this. In reality, Prop 34 exists as a way to hit back against the nonprofit group that wrote Prop 33. That's the rent control question that appears just before this one on your ballot. Prop 33 is the third attempt in recent elections to expand local rent control, put forward by a group called the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It's a huge nonprofit for AIDS prevention and treatment, but the foundation also advocates for affordable housing. The nonprofit reportedly made billions buying drugs for AIDS patients at a steep discount, but then billing health insurance the full price. That windfall comes from a federal drug discount program, and it's intended to help nonprofits to keep providing health care to lower-income people. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation used some of the money it got to buy whole apartment buildings in LA. The housing arm of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has come under fire for code violations in its buildings. There's a whole LA Times investigation about that. But the reason we're talking about it here is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation also spent hundreds of millions trying to get voters to approve more rent control, including Prop 33 this year. Hence, we have Prop 34. It's an attempt by California landlords to hit back. The California Apartment Association paid for Prop 34, trying to push the AIDS Healthcare Foundation to focus on healthcare and not housing. If Prop 34 passes, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation would have to spend at least 98% of the money it makes off the federal drug discount program on direct patient care. If not, the group could lose its license and nonprofit tax-exempt status. In theory, these same penalties would apply to any other nonprofit that raises money similarly on federal drug reimbursements, spends at least $100 million on expenses other than patient care, and that owns and operates apartments with more than 500 severe code violations. We don't know of any other group that might qualify besides this one nonprofit. A yes vote on Prop 34 passes the spending restrictions on combined healthcare and housing nonprofits that participate in the federal drug discount program, and a no vote rejects the measure.
Ooh, that was a lot to decipher there. Okay, glad Brandon's doing this for us. Coming up next, it's Proposition 35. So this initiative seeks to make a permanent tax on managed health care insurance plans. A third of Californians get their health insurance from Medi-Cal. That's California's Medicaid program. It's government-backed health insurance for people with lower incomes or with disabilities. Prop 35 is about raising more federal money for Medi-Cal. It's gotten harder and harder to find doctors who will still take Medi-Cal, and that's because the state has been slow to increase the rates that Medi-Cal pays to doctors. Prop 35 is aimed at fixing that by tinkering with a multi-billion-dollar tax most of us have never heard of. It's called the Managed Care Organizations, or MCO tax. If you're going to vote on a tax, I want you to know what the tax is. This one's so obscure, I had to go through a bunch of health finance experts to find people who could help explain it. So here goes. The MCO tax is a tax on health plans, one that you never see. Almost all of the MCO tax is paid to the state by the same health insurance companies who run our Medi-Cal plans. Stay with me. Those companies end up getting the money back from the state when the state pays them to run Medi-Cal. And then that raises money for the state. How? The federal government provides a 100% match of every dollar that the state spends on Medi-Cal. That adds up to $7 or $8 billion a year being transferred from the federal government to California's state government. The state spends some of this extra federal money on Medi-Cal, but also uses it to help balance the state budget. All of that is how we already pay for Medi-Cal today. What Prop 35 would do is make the MCO tax permanent in our state law instead of having to rely on the legislature to renew it every 3 years. But the federal government does have to keep approving the MCO tax in the future in order for California to keep on getting the federal money in future years. As long as it does, Prop 35 would dedicate more of the federal money to increasing Medi-Cal payments to doctors and clinics. The hope is that if we pay doctors more of them will accept Medi-Cal patients. Prop 35 does change how federal Medicaid money is spent in California. It steers that money to hospitals, doctors, and EMS companies. Those just happen to be the biggest campaign donors backing Prop 35. Governor Gavin Newsom is still counting on billions of federal Medicaid dollars, though, to help balance the state budget. He opposes Prop 35 for that reason. Even so, no one, not the governor or anyone else, bothered to submit an argument against Prop 35 to the official state voter guide. So when you look at it, you'll only see arguments from the yes side in there.
A yes vote on Prop 35 makes the existing health plan tax permanent and dedicates more of the money from it to funding Medi-Cal. A no vote rejects the measure, leaving the tax in place until at least 2026 and allowing the state to spend more of it on other parts of the state budget.
Wow, he helped simplify something really complicated there. Finally, we have Proposition 36, which would reverse some changes passed by California voters years ago.
Prop 36 would roll back changes to criminal laws in California that were made by voters a decade ago. In the year 2014, California voters passed Prop 47, downgrading a bunch of drug and theft crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Prop 36 would reverse many of those changes. Right now, California laws make it a misdemeanor to steal property worth $950 or less. Under Prop 36, that crime would become a felony if the offender had 2 prior theft convictions. There's a big difference between these 2 levels of crimes. Misdemeanors don't always result in hard time, but when they do, it's a year or less in county jail. Felonies, on the other hand, can carry multi-year sentences, sometimes served in county jail, but often in a state prison. Prop 36 would require prison instead of jail in more felony cases. Prop 36 does contain changes to push some drug possession offenders towards treatment programs instead of prison. It also comes with what lawyers call a Watson advisement for drug dealers. On conviction, judges would put those offenders on notice that they could be charged for murder if they sell drugs again and somebody dies from using them. It costs money to put people behind bars. The state's fiscal analysts figure we're talking tens or possibly hundreds of millions of dollars more a year to house people in state prisons if Prop 36 passes. A yes vote on Prop 36 passes the package of tougher penalties for specific theft and drug crimes. A no vote rejects the measure, leaving the criminal law the way it is.
Okay, we hope you got all of that. I know it's a lot to go through, but yeah, this was a nice, simple way to explain some really complicated, important issues in our state. As we conclude our special coverage of California's propositions, remember, your voice matters. Make sure to vote. Make your opinion count this election season. Every ballot is a step towards shaping the future of our state. For more election coverage, including sit-down interviews with California's political candidates, keep watching CBS 8 Plus. Our streaming channel has a lot more videos here to help you get informed about who and what to vote for. You can also always go to CBS8.com. Thank you so much for watching CBS 8 Plus, where we are always working for you. I'm Netta Iranpour.